Hey there, welcome to the Mountain of God project. My name is Camille. Today is 19th of March 2022. Welcome to video number 56. I want to continue talking about the four horsemen of the apocalypse and how it all plays out, and what we can see in today's newspapers, basically, and news broadcast about what's happening and how it's fulfilling the story of the Revelation. And when we talked about the first one, the white horse, the Antichrist, and everything that happens in Israel and so on. And I suppose to probably talk about the second one, because few things happened basically in the last few days, I feel urged to talk about the third one first. So let me just tell you a few things about the baseline, the things that I feel that I have to say before I'm going to talk about it, because I'm going to talk about some theories, some predictions, maybe something about, a few things that you might treat as conspiracy theories. But I want you to understand, I'm talking about it because, first of all, I want you to know that something is happening. Maybe the financial things that we're going to talk about today, it's not your thing, you don't really care. But I want you to see that something's happening. I want you to be aware that it does, and not to be surprised, because I want you to know basically how does that play out in this whole end time story. Second, I want you to understand why. I want to give you this whole, like a helicopter view on the whole story, so you would know exactly what is the end goal. Because when you'll know what is Lucifer's end goal, it's going to be much easier for you to understand why it's happening and where it's leading to. And then I want you to start kind of understand what can you do about this, or if is there something that you're supposed to do when things start happening. Because I want you to be prepared, not only to prepare yourself, not only to give yourself peace of mind because you knew kind of in hindsight what's going to happen, so you prepared yourself. But I also want you to get closer to your Father, exactly as I said at the beginning of the end of the last video. I want you to use this understanding to get closer to your Father, talk to Him, and kind of get in contact with Him much deeper, much more, become much closer to Him. And also open to what is your role here, to your calling and all of that. And even more, in all of this, help others. Because the things that I'm going to talk about today, they may not be easy for us, and they're not going to be easy for the rest of the world, people who are not prepared and not saved. Just saying in advance. So, again, there are four pillars of the beast system, and there are four horsemen of the apocalypse. First one is the Antichrist, white horse. It is basically about government, political, and religious takeover of the world. Second is a military, because the red horse is talking about war. Third one is basically financial or economical destruction, including famine, which is a black horse that we're going to be talking today. And fourth is a pale or green horse, which basically talks about all of the above, plus plagues and death itself. So we're going to talk about medical side of things, pharmakia, and death in much more detail. But let's just jump right into it about the black horse, which is financial economical destruction. And we will have to start with basically reading what is said in the Bible about it. I'm going to read from New International Version, obviously Revelation 6 verses 5 and 6. When the Lamb opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the four living creatures, saying, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages, and 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages, and do not damage the oil and the wine. Two things that I want you to look at here. We're going to come back to that later, but first of all is how much the price of the food will rise. That's the one thing. And second is do not damage the oil and the wine. Not everybody agrees with that, but basically I look at it, as some of the other people as well, as luxury items. So that will tell you that one of the things that will happen at the end is going to be not only the rise of the prices and famine being the result of it, and we're going to talk about it later, but also the discrepancy between rich and poor will be much, much bigger, because don't damage the oil and wine, meaning there'll be no problem for the luxury items, but there's going to be problem for those who, those with those items who we need like day to day. So obviously the ones that are going to hurt the most are the people at the lower parts of the hierarchy of the, kind of financial structure of the our society, right? So this is this is what I want you to understand. That it's about money. It's about impoverishing the lower classes, and the famine will be like a result of all of this. The next thing. Let's talk about famine and poverty, and let's look at what happened already that might tell us that it already started, or there's something to it that we can see in daily news. First of all, let me just put my headphones so I'll hear what you'll hear. We're going to look at what happened when the Ukraine war started, so we would be able to see what was the impact of it. Listen to this.
Wars can be terrible for supply chains. There can be disruptions, shortages, all kinds of challenges. The biggest example is oil. We've been seeing that. At the first sign of war, oil prices begin to rise. But in Ukraine, it is not just oil. Many more commodities are at stake, especially these three: wheat, sugar, and cooking oil. Let's start with the numbers. Russia is the largest exporter of wheat. They make up 18% of global exports. Ukraine is the fifth largest, making up 7% of global sales. Put together, that's 25%. What happens if this supply chain is disrupted? Shortages and inflation, that's what happens. Ukraine has already banned the export of food grains. Frankly, there's no other option. Ukraine's exports go through the Black Sea, specifically via three ports: Odessa, Kherson, and Mykolaiv. All three ports are on Russia's radar. Moscow too has announced a partial ban. They have temporarily stopped exports to ex-Soviet states. Imagine 25% of the global supply disappearing overnight.
Obviously, I'm going to put all the links in below the video, so you could kind of listen to everything that I'm putting here, and just playing the snippets of it. But that's the whole point. Many people looked at it and kind of mentioned that this part of the world is basically called the breadbasket of the world for a reason. 25% of exports of wheat basically will have impact on the rest of the world, and we saw that, and it's not the end, but this is it started then, and look, the war still continues. So we don't really know how it's going to impact, how long it's going to take for this war to finish, or what's going to happen, and what's going to be the impact. But that's part, the wheat is something that you can basically buy and get on your plate. But this is not the end of the story. Not only, not even mentioning the 75% of exports of sunflower oil and the sugar that she was talking about. This is just the tip of an iceberg. But second thing I want you to understand is this.
It's harvest season in the soybean field in southern Brazil. The city of Prudentopolis is more than 10,000 kilometers from Ukraine, but the war seems closer than ever. Russia and Ukraine account for nearly 30% of global fertilizer exports, but the war and sanctions are hurting supply chains across the world.
The question is, from where will Brazil buy more fertilizers? We have to find other markets, but it's not that simple.
So you see, another thing is with the fertilizers, because if you want to grow your own food, you'll say, well, we cannot export as much wheat as we want, so let's grow on our own. But if you have a fertilizer problem, then you'll have issues with growing it yourself, or the price of growing it yourself is going to rise as well. And they're going in this document much farther, and they're showing the examples of people, especially from the third world countries that many of them they have too much to pay because it's like many times fold what they paid in previous years. So it basically makes no economical sense to grow food, especially on masses. So that's going to have impact not only for now in my plate right now, but in the future. And some experts said that they're not really afraid about this winter or this season, but the next one, because of the wheat and then the fertilizer problem. But that's not the end. Look what something which is happening in US that might have impact for those of you who are listening in English. So I assume many or most of you will be in US or somewhere in UK or something. But this is something happening on your soil, on your ground, and I don't know if you kind of seen and hear about that.
Okay, so in about 3 seconds, I'm going to show you a list. Now, what this list shows is all the food processing plants that have either been burned or destroyed here in the US over the last 18 months. And as you can see, the list is pretty extensive. In fact, there are over 35 of them throughout the country. And it makes you wonder, why is this happening? And is this the reason for the food shortages that we've been experiencing here in the US and also the entire world? Now, some other questions that may pop into your head might be, is there someone looking to intentionally destroy these food plants to make the food shortages worse? And also, considering that most of these food processing plants were centered around meat, we have to ask the question, was this part of a bigger plan to decrease meat production so that companies like Beyond Meat and other alternative meat products can gain an edge? Considering that there are men like Bill Gates who heavily invested into these companies, which, by the way, we'll talk about him in a little bit. But
So this is interesting. Let me see what Tucker Carlson said. That was interesting as well.
Strange disasters began to beset food processors all over the United States. In April, the next month, the headquarters of one of this country's largest organic food distributors was destroyed in a fire, cause unknown. The next month, in a single week actually, 2 separate private plane crashes took out 2 separate food processing centers. One plane hit a General Mills plant in Georgia. The other plane hit a food plant in Idaho. By the way, back in February, a boiler explosion obliterated a potato processing plant in Oregon, and so on. So even people who aren't given to connecting the dots, who don't think of themselves as conspiracy nuts, began to wonder, is there something here? But no one could tell. The Biden administration had no answers and no way to get to the answers because they had no data. And that's interesting because the Biden administration tracks a lot of things, the things that it cares about, the race and ethnicity and sex life, for example, of every person in America. Do we have enough trans-Pacific Islanders playing woodwinds in major symphonies? How about gay Southeast Asians in long-haul trucking? These are the questions that concern the bean counters in the Biden administration. And yet at the same time, that same administration keeps no real records about the infrastructure of our food supply. Apparently that has never occurred to them.
Interesting, isn't it? So you guys, I would pay attention what's going on there in US, because whether it's a conspiracy or not, whether someone is doing it on purpose or not, although if you listen enough to my videos, you know that there are no coincidences, and 1 or 2 would be something that I would take as a coincidence. But if you look at the list, and this is one of the lists I found in the internet, there are probably more. Look how long the list is, and this is just 2021, 2022. Are you kidding me? But that being said, this is the food. So that's the first one, food crisis and fertilizer crisis. But now there's one more thing, which is the energy crisis, and especially here in Europe. I don't know if how much of that is in US, but Europe was scared about what happened since Russia entered the Ukraine's territory, because we had issues with natural gas, with the gas prices. So let's listen to CNBC. They're talking about that. That was like 3 months ago.
Brian, so with those numbers, they are staggering. And we know even if we wanted to build capacity to a point where we could fill those gaps, it could take years and maybe a decade to get the infrastructure up in place to get that thing going. I wonder, you mentioned that the ship behind you is not an American vessel. I'm curious, though, what the possibility is for an American opportunity for liquefied natural gas going to places around the world like Europe, how equipped is the U.S. energy infrastructure currently to be able to fill at least some of that gap that we have in Europe right now with LNG?
It's equipped well enough, and you nailed all the salient points. It is growing, but these are giant projects that will take years, okay? And I'm a tip of the cap, theoretical cap, because I'm not wearing one, although I wish I was, to the industry, which we did not have an LNG export industry, Dom, about 10 years ago. Now we've built it out enough with Cheniere, with Tellurian, with Venture Global, with Tellurian still working, Sempra Energy, Cove Point, which is owned by Berkshire Hathaway as well. Exxon, they're building a giant one, Golden Pass in Texas, which is actually a joint venture with the country of.
So basically what they're saying that the US is trying to cover the gap of the that we have in Europe with the energy. But listen to how big the gap is.
Yeah, and I think, listen, Dom, I think there's a narrative, and we talked about it a bit yesterday, but if you didn't see it yesterday, I'll repeat myself, which is there's a bit of a narrative that everything is fine in Europe because their storage is filled up or got filled up more than they expected. Well, that's true for this year, and that's good. And it was in large part due to quick thinking by countries like Germany getting some floating regasification LNG units, but also getting really lucky with the weather. October was the warmest October in Germany in 140 years. Mother Nature supremely cooperated. The risk is going into next year. Here's why. Okay, and here's the numbers and what we're going to talk about all day on CNBC. More than half of all the storage I just referenced, Dom, came from Russian pipeline gas. Pretty much all of it, not quite, there's like a tiny bit coming through. Pretty much all of it is offline. So now you've got this huge gap going into next year. Okay, all the Russian gas, it's half. Demand destruction, cutting off industry, that's going to take away a bunch of that. That's a positive thing. But let's do the numbers very quickly. Okay, so the IEA says a gap of about 30 billion cubic meters for next year. What does that mean? We're dealing with big numbers. I feel like Carl Sagan, billions and billions. Billions of cubic meters. Here's the very basic thing, Dom. That ship behind us here, about 10 of those is 1 billion cubic meter. So if there's a gap of 30 billion cubic meters or more, the math says you'd need at least 300 more of those, in addition to the ones that are already coming, in order to fill that gap. That number, by the way, Dom, is not possible, but that gives you an idea as to the scale of what Europe is dealing with.
So again, interesting enough, we have issues right now, and we are afraid about the next winter. So it's the same phrase coming back and again, that it's not really about what happened, but what is in front of us. So, and it wasn't, there was not only the natural gas, it was like a gasoline. Obviously, the prices, shoot up through the roof. And additionally, the electricity. So we basically have seen it, obviously that everybody was scared what to do. People went out on the streets. You could see the people on the street in Germany, let's say, as an example. I can tell you an example from here that the person who is the owner of the restaurant here, that kind of like in the place where I live, he has to close it since October. He's opened it like a few days ago in March, because he said, I had everything on gas, and I got the invoice which had one more zero in comparison to the previous year. So, many businesses will be hurt, and many of them will not be able to make it because of the rises of the prices of the electricity and basically the energy. So we talked about food, we talked about fertilizers, which is the food as well, and the food plants destroyed in US. Second, we talked about the energy crisis. But when I prepared the materials, it's like everything sounds like it's not enough. It's not everything. It's like something is missing. And interestingly enough, I start thinking about banking and those things were happened that we're going to talk about in a second. And I found this quote, basically, it was like eureka for me, and I understood why we have to talk about this. Look, this is what Henry Kissinger said. Who controls the food supply controls the people. Who controls the energy can control the whole continents. Who controls money can control the world. And that's why we need to look at the basically banking system or the whole financial system and where it's going, where we are in all of this and what's happening, because that will take the prime time and should take the prime time of our attention, because that's when the whole thing will play out, having impact on the food and on the energy and the rest of it. So let's look at the first video. Listen to this.
Anything else my next guest wants to talk about, because I always love catching up with her. Please welcome back to the show, Lynette Zang, Chief Markets Analyst over at ITM Trading. Lynette, so nice to see you. Welcome back.
Well, thank you for having me back, Daniela. I love being here. It's been way too long.
Way too long. And where shall I start? Where shall I start with you? Let's start let's start with this goodie. Central banks. This is according to the World Gold Council, buying the most gold on record last year. We know the banks leading this were Turkey, but we also know China, Egypt, Qatar, all buying gold last year, adding a whopping 1,136 tons of gold. That's worth about $70 billion to their stockpiles in 2022. I've asked other experts this, and I want to get your take. What are the central banks doing with this move? What do they know that we should know, Lynette?
Well, what they know that we should know is that this is the end of the experiment, and they are at the end of kicking the can down the road. So, the gold buying back to 1967. And what was happening in the 60s? We were transitioning into a new monetary system.
Yes. So let's jump a little bit farther to hear what she's going to say. What is the new system that she's talking about? What we heard about before, the central banks are stocking up gold in the highest rate since 67. Meaning that from 67 we didn't see such high rate of buying gold by central banks. Something to consider, and especially if you're investing, something that if they're doing it, maybe it's a good idea to do as well. But let's continue.
This was like a news item lower on the radar, but these are comments from the president of Belarus, Lukashenko, that I want to share with you, because he said the world will soon see new powerful monetary unions with a new reserve currency. Speaking earlier this week, he said, a new system of mutual settlements is taking shape, including in international trade. In short, time is ripe for changes. I believe that new powerful monetary unions with a new reserve currency will emerge soon. Any thoughts on this, Lynette?
Well, absolutely, because we've been watching the U.S. weaponize SWIFT. But there was a movement to create a new monetary union through the BRICS, even before it was overtly weaponized, meaning the SWIFT system, the global payment system. So, we saw it with the creation of the Shanghai Gold Exchange. We've seen it with the BRICS nations coming together. So absolutely. No currency maintains its status as the world reserve currency forever. And the U.S., has really been abusing that position in a lot of countries' opinions.
What do you think the U.S. is planning to do about it? They obviously see the rise of the BRICS. Do you think they're just sitting back thinking, impossible, no one can overtake us? Or are they concerned and carefully watching this? What's your take?
If you don't know, basically the whole idea behind behind the U.S. and dollar was basically that they were used for trade, especially with oil. That's why it's called petrodollar. And basically, the oil countries are moving to BRICS now. We're going to see it in a second. So that's like really undermining the value of the dollar. So listen to this. It is very interesting.
You know, I wish I wasn't about to say what I'm about to say, but I think that I think it's a very high level of arrogance, because the U.S. dollar is still primarily used in global trade. And so I think they just can't believe that they would be knocked off their seat, or maybe what seems like a conflict is not really a conflict. It's more a handing off of the baton.
Interesting.
And we aren't going to know that.
Explain. You think they would want to hand off the baton?
Well, there is historic precedence for that. I mean, back in '69, when the SDR was created over at the IMF, the U.S. had gone and said, here, take this back. We don't want this anymore. But then Kissinger created the petrodollar. And we see that petrodollar now falling apart, with Saudi Arabia saying, oh, well, we don't have to just take dollars. So, but here's the thing that I've been asking, and nobody's really going to know the answer to this. So this is just a possibility. What if the world, all the leaders, all the central bankers in the world actually know that this is the end of this current experiment and they want to transition us into the new system and retain their power? So part of what always happens during these transitions are wars. But if you look at what's been happening for really quite some time, especially since 2008, don't we seem to lurch from crisis to crisis to crisis, keeping everybody off balance?
It feels like that to me, yeah.
Exactly. So what if it's not really them versus us, but everybody, all the central bankers and the governments working together to create this transition? I know it sounds crazy.
No,
but
nothing sounds crazy anymore.
Listen to that. This is where we're going.
Right.
Okay. Is it to usher in the new era of central bank digital currencies?
Oh, yes. It's the surveillance era, and I just got goosebumps. And who has been leading the way to that but China? And, you know, other countries can look at China and say, oh, well, you know, look at their government versus, they might say we have democracy, but we don't really have democracy here. But China's been showing the world how to control their population, except for just recently when they changed the mandate. And I think that's because of the population was starting to rise up in more different areas. So I was very happy to see that. But China's really been showing us the way to get adoption of the CBDC and how to control a society. So it would make some level of sense for them to be taking over.
So now, cryptocurrencies and central bank digital currencies. This is something that you should know, and I'm not going to go into details because it's a long story. Let me just get back to you. Reset my camera. But this is something that you should know and should understand how it all plays out, because it's going to redefine everything that we know about banking and about basically using money. But let's see, if China is the leader in this whole thing, let's see how it all works in China, what's going on in there, and listen to this, which is all connected, is not directly the digital currencies, but this is exactly the level of control that China has on its people. And when the cryptocurrency is going to be like this cherry on the top, that will give them even more. meaning in Europe, because in China they already have it, as you will see it in video.
China's pursuing an ambitious plan to create an omnipresent video surveillance network. The Shuiliang or Sharp Eyes project aims to extend and integrate video surveillance from cities into villages and from roads into residential compounds. It aims to use artificial intelligence, big data and deep learning to analyze this mountain of video evidence, to work out who's doing what, where and when, to track suspects and the people they associate with, and even to predict crime. In November, I visited 3 tech companies in the cities of Beijing and Chongqing to see how China plans to make the communist slogan, "The masses have sharp eyes," into a reality. Here are a few of the ideas that the tech companies showcased. These cameras are looking at a road junction and they're identifying everything that's passing through. They're looking at cars, reading the number plates, and they're looking at pedestrians, classifying pedestrians according to their age, their gender, what kind of clothes they're wearing, even what kind of hairstyles they have. This software analyzes crowds. It's producing a heat map of where people are massing together, the sort of thing you might use to prevent overcrowding. You can also see that it's also able to track individuals through the crowd. So if you're looking for a suspect, this is the kind of software you might want to use. Here we can see 2 cameras picking faces out of the crowd, comparing those faces to a national database of suspects, of wanted men and women. The police then look at the matches that are flagged and see whether they think that's someone they're looking for. They can then swoop in to potentially arrest or question the person that the cameras have identified. A completely different application now. This camera is trained on the face of a truck driver. It's looking at his facial expressions and what he's doing to see whether he's showing any signs of tiredness. If the score rises above a certain level, then he's seen as too tired to drive. His company will be alerted. They'll give him a call and tell him to take a rest. The Sharp Eyes project has already been rolled out in more than 50 cities. So far, the tech doesn't quite match the ambition, but experts agree that facial recognition is improving fast and is a technology of the future. Concerns are being raised about whether the system will be used in China to unfairly target ethnic minorities or be used as a way to crack down on dissidents and activists. But in the tech startups that I visited, the young elite staff seemed cheerfully unaware of those kind of concerns.
Obviously, right? So this is the technology they have, and you may ask how is that connected to cryptocurrency. Look what's happening, because that was recorded like 5 years ago. Look what's happening right now, what is like day-to-day experience for them, and how it all connects via technology.
Face recognition payment in China. This is something that will scare a lot of Westerners, but this is a norm in China now. You don't need your card, you don't need to bring your phone. You just need to scan the item you want to buy and the machine will scan your face. Then the money is deducted from your Alipay or WeChat Pay. That is so convenient.
That is so convenient, right? So basically all this thing was connected basically, and now basically use your face to pay for everything. Which is scary if you understand what is the kind of impact in the long term, and how much power it's giving to the financial institutions when they have this kind of information about you. They can track you wherever you go. And the next interview will tell you a lot about what are the digital currencies and using them in the banking would do, and especially that we know because they tell us straight there in their papers what kind of what kind of impact it will have. Listen to this.
Way of streamlining digital transactions. Critics and skeptics point out that such a system would give the state full access to the details of all transactions, as well as the ability to cut off an individual's money supply with the flick of a digital switch. As well as state-owned and controlled digital currencies, there exist alternatives whose supporters insist guarantee freedom from the eyes and hands of the man. Joining me to discuss some of those possible paths to freedom is commentator and Bitcoin enthusiast Layah Heilpern. Hello Layah, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
No, it's good. It's good. Tell me, first of all, why do you think governments around the world are clamoring to introduce central bank digital currencies, CBDCs?
Well, it's very simple. Central bank digital currencies are programmable. So it essentially means that it's a much more easier way to push agendas, political agendas. For example, the World Economic Forum is talking about implementing a carbon allowance. So every individual will be given a certain amount of carbon that they are allowed to emit into the atmosphere. With a central bank digital currency, this becomes far more efficient because with a click of a button, you literally just program the money. And so if for whatever reason you buy too many burgers, too many sausages one week, when you go to fill up your car, your money could be cancelled. It could get declined simply because you use too much of your carbon allowance, essentially. Or even if you go to buy a plane ticket, it could get cancelled because you bought too many burgers, you bought too much meat that week. So it's much easier to push forward political agendas and political ideologies when you have money which is programmable with just a click of a button.
It's not really money, is it? A central bank digital currency. It's more of an outward demonstration of your obedience to whatever is the message of the day, and you get rewarded with a certain amount of purchasing power.
Exactly. So in Canada, for example, during the height of the pandemic, if you didn't want to get vaccinated and you just wanted to protest bodily autonomy, you would have your money and your bank account shut down and declined because you weren't a good citizen. So with a central bank digital currency, it doesn't matter what your opinion is. If you do not hold the correct opinion, and if you're not a good citizen, then absolutely that money will be programmed to be used against you. Even in the height of the pandemic, you had to be chaperoned to go into certain stores. So it creates a far more efficient way to discriminate against certain people. You don't need that middleman anymore. Again, with a click of a button, if you're not a good citizen, your money will be programmed to be used against you.
Interesting, isn't it? So this is something you need to know, that there are obviously there are, you know, as this gentleman from China said, this convenience. There's a lot of convenience in this whole crypto chapter of the financial story of the human race. But I want you to understand that there's tons of negative sides which will be used against us. And we're going to talk about it later. Look at what we're talking about. Look at it from perspective of the Bible, and what is the Lucifer's end plan for all of this. Don't look at, you know, day-to-day life. Have a perspective and try to see where this whole story that I'm trying to get you through gonna go. And regarding CBDCs, I'm not gonna go into details, but I want you to understand that the everything is already in works, and this is one of the points that I want to start with, going into the kind of sub part of this whole video. Why would I even talk about it now? What is the reason for it? Let me give you a few information about the CBDCs, so you would know what are we talking about, not even going into the details. So first of all, look, this is the map of where are we as a global community in working with about CBDCs. The Africa is having some issues. There are few places here and there, but in most of the countries, the works on their local CBDCs, meaning they own a cryptocurrency, like a digital version of their own currency, already well in advance and worked. And as far as I know, most of it is like really lagging. Second thing I want you to understand, that not only you'll need CBDCs to have this whole thing working, but second, you'll need a bridge. You'll need some technology that will be able to talk with all of the cryptocurrencies, you know, building on a different technologies and the different protocols. You'll have to be able to talk in between each other. So we need a bridge. One of those bridges which is working right now in between every bank and financial institution is SWIFT. This is basically a company that basically provides this feature of being able to send money across the planet. It takes days and it costs a lot. This is the old technology. The new technology, or there's one company which basically took that and translated this functionality into crypto world, and it's called Ripple. and they used the token which is called XRP, and they basically did the same thing on the blockchain, and it takes seconds to get from here to whatever place on the planet. It costs fraction of a dollar. It's just cent or fraction of a cent, something like this. Depends on the obviously on the how much cash you're sending. So there's debate, and I'm not gonna go into it. If Swift going to be replaced by XRP or they're going to cooperate, doesn't really matter. But I want you to know that there is something to it. That there's a platform built on a cryptocurrency which is doing the same thing as Swift. Interestingly enough, the third thing that you need to know or need to have for all this financial world to move into cryptocurrencies, you will have to have not only the bridge, but you will also need to have an algorithm or messaging system which will basically translate everything in between all of those systems, which might try to talk to each other in different ways. And this is something that was created, which is called ISO 222. This is a standard and the methodology and technology, basically, which is basically, as it says on their official website, a single standardization approach, methodology, process, repository to be used by all financial standards initiatives. And interestingly enough, if you look at the Ripple's official site, Ripple is now the part of the ISO standard body, the first member focused on distributed ledger technology, cryptocurrencies. So they're in this whole thing. But even more interesting, because the whole world's trying to figure it out, if Swift is going to use this XRP Ripple thing, which is called on-demand liquidity, ODL. One thing that happens, and this is one of the major reasons I talked about, I'm recording this video right now, Sunday 19 of March, that Swift is finally migrating to ISO 2022, which is the messaging system prepared for digital currencies. And they're doing it in March of 2023. And to be exact, they're doing it on 20th of March, meaning tomorrow. So the bridge is moving to the new messaging system. Will anything happen? I don't know, but I just want you to know that if something is going to happen in the next few days, you might have an information where this whole thing came from and what is the reason that some things might happen. Moving forward, one additional thing that happened, which is even more fascinating or terrible or frightening to some, is that for some apparent reason, in the last few days, banks in US and quite a big banks started to fall out of nowhere. And this is what I want you to see. This is the Wikipedia page of 3 banks that basically failed, like 16th of March, which was like 3 days ago. It was Friday? Thursday? Let me see. 16th. That was Thursday. The first 2 banks and the 3 banks that failed are Silvergate Bank, Silicon Valley Bank, which is Silicon Valley. It's for technology bank, which is basically for technology, for startups, some cryptocurrency, and Signature Bank as well. So 3 banks failed. And out of nowhere, 4th bank, which is European banks, Credit Suisse, kind of joined the party of the failing banks. So it all happened like Thursday, Friday. So basically now we're during the weekend, and everybody's scratching their heads. What's going to happen Monday? Listen to this this video from Valuetainment, kind of interesting channel. If you're into investment types, you probably know it.
Tom, give us an update on what's going on with Silicon Valley and Credit Suisse, because a bunch of stuff came out just yesterday. You saw their stock at the beginning. The Dow was down 600, and then it ended up a couple hundred down. What's going on with the markets right now?
Well, speaking of utopia, overnight, this is very interesting. This can be summed up in one chart. Do you have the chart that came from Apollo? So this is a very interesting chart that comes out assessing the balance sheet risk of the banks. Yeah, can you pop that up a little? And the arrow up there that's toward the left side is pointing to Silicon Valley Bank. Everything to the right of Silicon Valley Bank is actually more risky and slightly worse off than the Silicon Valley Bank balance sheet was. And then if you go all the way to the left, you've got at a score of 15 JP Morgan showing strength, prudence, and, probably, the utopia banking experience there because it's risky. So
you see, I hope you're hearing this. If you're not, financially savvy in this whole thing, this arrow shows the bank that failed. It's basically done. And all of those banks over here are basically the ones that are having worse balance sheets than the one that failed. Again, this one failed. All of those are in a worse situation than this one. So you see, where's the problem? That the whole financial system is starting to be scared if that's gonna create a domino effect. It's gonna start this whole snowball thing that basically one gonna fail, and out of nowhere some other bank will gonna fail just because there are some hidden transactions in between them and so on. So that's why I want you to understand how big risk and how financial system is scared what's going on, especially now because it's a weekend, because what's happening.
What overnight has happened is that there is the realization that there is a lot of risk at a lot of banks. That's happened overnight. Right before the market closed, First Republic, remember they said that was the other bank everybody was concerned about. It has been downgraded and officially given the rating as junk. And Moody's came out and said, you're not pinning this on us. We're just going to say the whole sector is downgraded. And they downgraded the entire sector to this questionable status.
Can you hear it? All financial sector was downgraded by one of the well-known rating agencies to questionable level, junk basically, whole banking sector. So it should give you an understanding why the financial sector is basically really scared of what's going on.
And so right now, literally, Pat, what we are waiting for the markets to show us market response to the stocks of the public banks.
What's going to happen Monday?
And waiting for the other shoe to drop, because it's not just New York and it's not just SVB and it's not just First Republic. It's Credit Suisse yesterday morning coming out saying with a stock price of $2.44. So they're down the street from being delisted. I mean, they're not far away. I think it's 90 cents for so many days and something, they would be, put on a suspension and then ultimately delisted. So what's going on is there's a huge amount of uncertainty, Pat, and there's big amount of uncertainty that no one can have an opinion on. Can I show you a poll real fast?
Of course.
About what is the Fed going to do in the face of all this madness? And I put a poll on Twitter yesterday. So here's 326 votes. Do you think,
this doesn't really matter because it's just a poll, but basically they're talking about one of the things we're going to talk in a second, which is basically what Fed is going to do. Just check what's going to happen next. And this is basically what Fed said. This is Jerome Powell, which is basically a Federal Reserve chairman. So it's basically the main guy in Central Bank of the United States. This is what he said, and that was 5 months ago.
No one knows whether this process will lead to a recession, or if so, how significant that recession would be. That's going to depend on how quickly wage and price inflation pressures come down, whether expectations remain anchored, and whether, also do we get more labor supply, which would help as well. In addition, the chances of a soft landing are likely to diminish to the extent that policy needs to be more restrictive or restrictive for longer. Nonetheless, we're committed to getting inflation back down to 2% because we think that a failure to restore price stability would mean far greater pain later on.
Interestingly enough, he's saying it at least twice in 5 months ago, that soft landing is diminishing, and we don't know if it's gonna spark the recession. And he's talking about, this is exactly what Fed is trying to do, and Central Bank of Europe is doing the same thing. They're trying to fight with the inflation, basically rising the prices of the normal commodities that we use day to day, like bread, milk, and gasoline, and so on. And the interest rates, which basically one kind of steer the other. And the problem is that the Fed and the European Central Bank as well is got to the point that they cannot do anything, because no matter what they're gonna do, it's gonna fail. And all of those things, when you add them together, it creates complete scare, because people don't know what to do. Banks are failing. Fed is right here saying that they're losing control and they don't know how it's going to play out. And interestingly enough, why I'm even talking about Fed in this context is that the next meeting Fed is having 21st and 22nd of March, which is basically Tuesday and Wednesday. So banks are falling. We don't know what's going to happen. What's going to happen with those old banks, how the market's going to react Monday. We've got SWIFT changing. Interesting coincidence that everything happened in 1 week. The SWIFT is switching to the ISO 2022 Monday, and then you've got Tuesday and Wednesday you've got Fed meeting, which basically said we'll say what we're going to do, and we'll see how market's going to react to that. Not only adding to that it's spring solstice, which is basically very, very occult dates, and many things that happen in March. All those things. Then next week is going to be crucial to kind of find out where we are, and that's why I'm recording this video right now. Just because I felt that there's too many things that are happening in 1 weekend and 1 week in front of us, that if something's going to happen, I want you to be aware of it. I want you to know how to put it together, how to react, and what does it even mean. And I will list those people if you want to dig deeper. I just, out of the top of my head, I basically listed the name of the people that I know that I talked about it. Many of them talked about it for years. Many of them wrote books about it, that this crisis is coming and why exactly. And they'll show you different point of views, and they talk about many things, how to defend yourself, like investing in gold and silver and so on. And I'll post this, but I want to read the names: Lynette Zang, Mike Maloney, Jim Rickards, Dr. Nouriel Roubini, Peter Shiff, Harry Dent, Rick Rule, Doug Casey, Robert Kiyosaki, Gerald Celente, Michaerl Burry, George Gammon, Jim Rogers, and many, many others talked about it for years. And now we see it happening. So that's why it might be interesting. It might be interesting. And on top of that, I would add a few additional things that happened in the last few years that kind of make this whole thing scarier even more if you understand the context. Because first of all, this is something not to overwhelm you with the financial information, but just to give you an additional understanding that it will impact you as well and how it might impact. First of all, we're going to talk about Cyprus in 2013. Because that was one of the major things that happened after 2008 and the crisis of the GFC. It was a global financial crisis, right? That whole subprime, or basically housing loans crisis in 2008. Because what happened in 2008 is when the banks failed, they said, listen, they went to the governments and say, listen, or you're going to give us money or we're going to destroy the whole system. So there was a TARP program, which basically was bailing out the banks, meaning the governments took money from us as a people and basically give them to banks to cover their own stupid decisions and bad investments. So everything went away. We kind of dealt with this. But what happened in Cyprus in 2013 should scare you, because what basically happened there is like in failing banks did not bailouts but bail-ins. What basically means, and this is funny how it's written, the bail-in of uninsured depositors can result in unpredictable switches in ownership in the resolved institution. What basically means that bank is not going to get money from the government to cover their own losses, but they're going to take your money. And the law was changed that if you deposit money in a bank, it's not your money, it's theirs. And there's some kind of valve of securing the people, which in United States it's done by FDIC, which is basically insuring your money. But if you got in US, that's $250,000. If you have anything above, it's going to be taken. They can, because it's not insured. In Europe, we've got the same thing. In Poland, it's like 100,000 euros, I think. But basically, this is what happened in Cyprus. If you had something above, the bank basically took your money to cover its own losses. They basically stole your money. Second thing that happened in all of this is the US debt. The US debt. Look at this. That was 2020. They had let's say $21 trillion of national debt. Now they're having 31. So it's basically let me see, it was 34% increase. But if you look closer and you look at what happened since 2008, when we supposed to learn the lesson and draw the conclusions, look what happened. Since that time, it rose from $10 trillion, the national debt, to 31, which is basically 3,100%, which is over threefold of the national debt. How do you think it's going to work out? And interestingly enough, something that you should know about FDIC and securing, and it's I assume it's FDIC and it's in Europe the same thing. Listen to what Morris is going to say about this.
So what's going on here? Well, the real secret is that the emperor has no clothes. The FDIC, right, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which is basically the insurance version of the federal government insuring your bank deposits. Whenever you go into a bank, it says FDIC insured. Well, it's insured up to $250,000. But the real story, of course, is that they have trillions of dollars that they have to insure, but they only have a couple hundred billion, about 200 billion in assets to cover all of that. So what happens if you want to take your money out of the bank and everyone decides, you know what, I don't trust the banking system anymore. I'm going to go to cash. I'm going to take my money out. I'm going to put it in real estate and gold and silver or Bitcoin, but I don't trust the banking system anymore. Well, guess what happens? The FDIC doesn't have money to cover that. And if these banks collapse because they don't have the money in the banks either, the FDIC does not have the money to cover it. Now, on my other show, we covered the FDIC, the secret meeting.
Did you hear that? They have few trillions to cover, and they have 200 billion. If you count the zeros, you'll understand that they don't have even close to enough money to cover this. As far as I remember, I'm going to do the math on the fly, but it's they have 3% of what they're supposed to have to cover all the insurance money. And that's why I showed you the national debt, because it has some impact to it. Let me just restart my camera. I'm not going to stop the video. But I hope you understand what does it mean. That basically, you hear that you're covered, but you're not. And that should scare you, because it's basically, when people understand that, it produces one thing that we're going to talk exactly in a second, that scares the financial system even more. That what might happen is that people gonna do something which is called what is it called? Is it the run on the bank? And listen to this.
Withdrawals from their money. We've got to stop withdrawals, right? So if you want to go get your money out, sorry, not available. We're stopping it. We're shutting it down. So we've already seen this. Of course, we've seen this in some European countries. We know what happened in Greece, right? We saw what happened in Afghanistan when people went to the banks to get their money out. And sorry, bank said, your money's not here. It's gone. What? We've been seeing what's happening in Ghana. We've been covering that. And South Africa. And also in some other African countries as well, experiencing this run on the bank issue. Certain people are allowed to go in the banks and get money, but the average customer is not. They're being told you're not allowed to use the ATM machines.
This is Access Bank at Ifako. While a lot of customers are standing outside to have access to the ATM, the security guards locked the compound, the access to the ATM, took some people inside, collected their ATM cards, and have been giving them money in bulk. Here they are. Look at the people. Those are people they allow in. Those are the people they allow. They allow these people in to give them bulk. They give them access to bulk cash. While their customers are out there restricted from having access to the ATM. This is GT Bank.
Only the wealthy elites are able to go into the bank and leave with bags of cash. And we showed you the video of that. And people outraged on the streets. So,
So this is what I want you to understand. Run on the banks is basically going to destroy the whole system, because if the mass is going to wake up and they're going to be afraid that they're not going to be able to take their money, everybody is going to run on bank. There'll be no money. And if you want to dig deeper a little bit into it, I would suggest to watch the video which is called Money as Debt. It'll tell you a lot about central banking, and especially about fractional reserve banking, which basically means that if you put $1,000 in the bank, they are able to produce to $100,000 of money out of thin air. So basically, what basically it means that in general, there's so much in comparison into how much money there is in physical form in comparison to the money which are in circulation. It's basically is like single percents. So if everyone is going to run to the bank to get in cash, they're not going to get it, because the money is not there, not in a physical form. Exactly the same thing is going to happen if the digitally people start to withdraw or sending the money into bigger banks because they are afraid about their small bank or something. The banks doesn't have this money because it invested in something, so they have to sell. So it's always like a domino effect. So that's why they're so afraid of the run on the banks, because basically it happened in 2029 and it caused the Great Depression. People started running to withdraw the money, and it destroyed the banks, destroyed the stock market, and basically the domino effect destroyed everything. And if you listen to some of the specialists, they say that it took stock market to get back to the same level from 2029, 25 years. That's how long it took to get back to the same level as it was in 2029. So that's why the whole debt and the whole amount of money is scary. One keyword again that I would suggest to listen when you watch the news and so on is liquidity crisis, because that's exactly what it means. There's no liquidity, there's no money to give to everyone. Let's continue. So this is Jim Rickards. And he gonna say something that he wrote in a book like 5-6 years ago or even more, and he's gonna say about something which is called ICE 9, and this is exactly what is the pinnacle of this whole story. to some degree. Watch this.
Right now. But first, I want to bring it back to a book you wrote a few years back, Road to Ruin, where you outline, for our viewers who are not familiar, an ICE 9 scenario. ICE 9 is a metaphor that you borrowed from author Kurt Vonnegut from his book, Cat's Cradle from the 60s, where it basically outlines this doomsday scenario. Where there's this complete economic freeze. I'm hearing hedge fund managers right now on CNBC, preeminent Wall Street guys saying we need a 30-day shutdown. Are we in an ICE 9 situation? Will we see a complete economic freeze? And is that what is needed right now, Jim?
Well, we're in a potential ICE 9 situation, but the point I was making in the book, and you described it very well, Daniela, is that it doesn't work. And so let me just spend 1 minute on what it is and 1 more minute on why it doesn't work. So in Kurt Vonnegut's book, Cat's Cradle from the early 60s, which I highly recommend, a physicist invented an isotope of water. He called it ICE 9, and it had a couple characteristics. But one of them was that if ICE 9 came in contact with regular water, H2O, it would turn the regular water into ICE 9, which is frozen at, let's call it room temperature. And he gave a vial of it to each of his 3 children. Now, the idea was if you open the vial and poured it into a stream, the stream would freeze, but then the ocean would freeze, the world would freeze, and all life on Earth would come to an end. So it was a doomsday machine. Again, a metaphor for nuclear war, which is what we were facing at the time. So what I did, I took Kurt Vonnegut's idea and his ICE 9, and I brought it over to the financial markets. And I said, the same thing is true. If you shut the New York Stock Exchange, and that's what people are talking about, okay, you can do that. The stock market won't go down. What that does, by the way, when you close the stock exchange, you're converting publicly traded equities into private equity. It doesn't mean your stock goes away. It doesn't mean anyone steals your money. It just means you can't trade it, which is what private equity is. No one who invests in private equity expects liquidity. You hope for a good return. But the problem is the pressure just goes somewhere else. And so if you shut down the New York Stock Exchange and I can't sell stocks and get cash, I'm going to sell my money market funds or redeem my money market funds. Well, then you got to shut down the money market fund industry. And then people say, okay, I'll go to the banks. I'll go to the ATMs. I'll take the cash out. And then you got to shut down the banks. So the point is, it spreads from exchange to money markets to brokerage accounts to banks, et cetera. And you end up shutting down the entire system, because when you shut down part, you don't eliminate the need for liquidity. You just drive it to another sector. Then you end up shutting that down. So at the end of ICE 9, the entire global financial system is shut down. Right. That's the extreme case. But that's why it doesn't work. You need other solutions.
So see, this is something that is well known phrase, the ICE 9, and this is something that they are afraid that everything is this whole house of cards is going to collapse, and they have to do something about it. Meaning, it takes time to rebuild this kind of stuff. So that's why, as she said at the beginning, that she heard from the fund managers that they need 30 days. Switch the system for 30 days. And interestingly enough, I found this video like yesterday. Just because I don't have the link here. This gentleman is talking about it as well. And this is one of the things that I want you to think about, because maybe this is something to take into your prayer room and think about it, especially in context of what's happening right now. Let me just...
Because I've just come off an insider's call. Say be prepared, because yes, there is going to be a very rough patch before this all switches over. You're talking the complete end of a system that's been around for hundreds of years. The elites are literally being pulled down. They're still fighting to try and stay in, but they're turning like crazy. There's loads of people sort of saying, oh, we didn't know, and obviously the amount of information getting from these guys is crazy, so it's just increasing more and more arrests. So yeah, get ready. March the 20th it begins. They honestly don't know how long this is going to take. So I've had people sort of saying, just be prepared for 2, 3, even 4 weeks. As long as you've got like food and money for 4 weeks, just to be on the safe side. But They're hoping it's only going to be around sort of 10 days, something like that. But it's 10 days from when is the question. So from the minute the cash machines and the ATMs and the banks stop releasing the money, you're talking anywhere from 10 to 30 days. That's probably what I would go with, just in case. If it's 10 days, fantastic. If it's more than that, best be prepared.
So basically what he's saying is like 10 days of darkness, which is basically fascinating, because he's saying that the moment the bank's going to crash, it's going to take some days that you may not have access to your money, and who knows how it's going to impact the shops, how it's going to impact the everything basically, if it's going to go down. Not even mentioning if all the internet's going to go down, but that's a completely different story. But you know what I'm saying? If for 10 days or 30 days we would not have access to your money, how many people would have really important issues? They would struggle in a day 2 or 3. So that's why, adding this whole thing together, the banks that are failing, the Feds, the meeting, the ISOs, the SWIFT switching to ISO on Monday, basically, everything looks like everything is accumulating. So that's why I said, let's record the video, because it seems important. Not only saying that, going back to the video that I talked about the Israelis leaving the Egypt and how it parallels to the story of the Revelation. Look, there were 3 days of darkness. But today, who cares if there be no light? We've got candles, we've got, the fire, we can do whatever we want. You can get a power bank and a power bank and put the USB light in it, and you have light for I don't know, days or months. Doesn't really matter. But what would be a complete destruction and complete the days of darkness if we would be cut off of the internet, or at least cut off our financial system. All investments, everything which is done through the internet would not work if the internet would be down. That would be a complete disaster, because then, everybody who's working remotely, me included, that would mean that I would not be able to log into my work. Even though I, work remotely, even if I would go there into our office, I would not be able to do anything, because our servers are working through the internet. But even if only the financial system would be cut off for 10 or 30 days, it's going to be a chaos on the streets. So that's why I kind of understand why it's called the 10 days or 30 days of darkness. And it's another parallel in between Israelis leaving Egypt and the story of the Revelation. So this is something fascinating. And a cherry on the top, I want to go back to the first verse that we talked about from the Revelation, talking about the end times. And this basically this horse. Let me just move this, I'm gonna need it. So let's look at this. So it says basically 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wage, right? So I did like a very simple calculation. What would that mean for us if we would literally translate it into today's prices and earnings? And look at this. I took the minimum wage for US, which is $7.25 per hour. That's like very, very low, but I wanted to squish the numbers as much as I can, because otherwise, if I go to extremes, the numbers are basically outrageous. So I took $7.25 per hour. Then I took the price of the wheat. So it basically $2.45 for 5 lb of whole wheat flour. So let's do the calculations. If we were taking 5 lbs, which is basically $2.49, and 5 lbs is 2.26 kilogram, it means that 1 kilogram costs more or less $1.10. The daily wage, which is $7.25 times 8 hours of work, which basically means that the daily wage is $58. So, if we take this verse saying that there's going to 1 kilogram. Where's the verse? The 1 kilogram of wheat will cost day's wage. It would mean that 5 lbs, which is 226, 2 kilos and 2.26 kilograms of wheat times 58 the daily wage, it would mean that this 5 lb bag would cost $131, if my math is correct. If you take $10 of minimal wage, it's going to be $180 for this bag of wheat. It basically gives you 52 and 64 times the price that you pay today. It should scare you. Even if we try to lower the numbers and say, I'm not gonna, let's crunch the numbers and then tighten them by not taking the cheapest flour, but the sixth one, the more fancy one. Even though it gives you like 21 or almost 22x the price, which if you would translate it into like normal things that you'll buy, like gasoline is like $3.5. If you multiply it by almost 22, it'll give you over $76 per gallon. If we use the higher multiplier, it's going to be $184 per gallon. That's absurd. Two cheeseburger meal in McDonald's, $4.89. It'll cost $107 or $257. One Coca-Cola can, now it costs 60 cents. It will cost you $13 or $31. Even if you want to crunch numbers even more, you'll say, I'm not going to eat wheat. I would eat barley because it's cheaper than 1/3 of the price. Divide 21, it's sevenfold, which means gasoline, it's not going to cost $3.50. It's going to cost $24.50 per gallon. Two cheeseburger meal, it's not going to cost $4.89. It's going to cost $34.23. One Coca-Cola Coke can would not cost 60 cents, but $4 and $2. Imagine, even in the lowest multiplier, if you have to multiply the price of everything that you pay for 7 times, including your gas price, including your energy bill, including your mortgage, everything would cost that much because the value of money would be so low. Who would be able to survive with this? Maybe the elites, maybe the ones who are billionaires now are going to become millionaires. They're going to be able to survive. That's why they would be able to afford buying wine and oil. But normal person would basically die. So I want you to have this perspective. What does it even mean? And how would that play out in this whole perspective? So let's move forward, and I want you to hear like a summary of what's said, and I want you to understand why in context of everything, this failing and so on, all those things that pushed me to record this video, what they're saying further about this year.
I have had experts as Doug Casey recently on my show saying 2023 will be the year that we'll see the introduction of central bank digital currencies. Some would say it's still too soon. Any takes here? Could this be the year? Are they still in pilot project phase? Where are we at with it, you think?
Well, I think we're a lot further along with it than they want us to understand. So I would agree with Doug that this is going to be the year that we see the CBDCs introduced in earnest. And I can see it, and I could be dead wrong on this, but I could see it happening the second half of this year sometime.
Interesting that she said that, because first of all, if they don't want us to know how far they are in this whole progress, that will mean that will make sense, because the beginning of the ISO 2022 implementation was in November last year. Now it's happening this Monday. Nobody outside of the cryptocurrency space not really talking about it. And now when she's talking about the end of the year, when you look at what is SWIFT or what is ECB, European Central Bank, talking about implementation, when we're talking about the US is going to be fully fledged in Q4 of 2023, which is basically November. That's what they're preparing. The Fed now, the Fed project, going to build on this. It's basically going to start. It's going to start. I think it's like in a month or two, and then the full implementation is going to be in November, as far as I remember. So basically, everything is happening. Everything that they say fits. So listen, I want you to understand one simple thing, and that's going to be the overview of this whole thing that I talked to you for 1 hour and 20 minutes. Bible says, and this is fascinating that it's used in economy as well, that it's Matthew 13:12. Whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. It basically says, and this is how economy probably interprets it, is that if you have this mindset that I've got this talent, and I'm not going to do anything about it, you just, bury it and just hope for the best. You'll have this mindset where not looking what's going on, not trying to interpret what's going on. And you basically, when something's going to happen, you basically, you're going to be surprised, and you're going to be swept away with everyone else. That's why this is what Bible says, and what economy agrees, that if you have a mindset to multiply what you have, work on it, and pay attention to what's going on, you are able to not only look ahead and prepare yourself to survive, but only look ahead, understand what's going on, and maybe find something that will appreciate in value, so you will not only defend yourself, but maybe gain something from it. That's why I would suggest listen to those people, and I'm going to put the list of those names in the under the video, so you would maybe listen to those people. But most of them agree: invest in gold and silver. If you see this whole system, understand that it would be good to invest in some crypto because it's coming. But which one? Well, there's a ISO system which is implemented. So, is there anything that I could find out about this? And if you look at ISO 2022 compliant cryptos, you'll find that there are like 7 of them. Look, just 7. No Bitcoin, no Ethereum, nothing else. Again, this is not a financial. I'm not financial advisor. It's not financial advice. But if they're implementing this, why would they use something different? We talked about Ripple, XRP. It's there. Everything fits. Not a financial advice, but think about it. Maybe there's a reason you're seeing this. Maybe there's a reason I was pushed to record this video, for you to understand that there's still time. We'll see what's going to happen this week. Maybe, I don't know, but maybe there's still time for you to do something to cover yourself and your family, your close ones. Okay, so let me just show you one more thing, because I think I passed it, and I want you to listen to this, because that will tell you when the game is over. And I think it's worth listening to. Again, Maurice will tell us.
People who we don't necessarily trust.
So the bottom line is it's a house of cards. And so now we have our first stunning piece of video from the FDIC and a stunning meeting that they held in November that they don't want you to see. So it just leaked, and this video is out. You're going to see members of the FDIC and other panel discussions in this FDIC meeting. It's not just FDIC members. It's lawyers, it's bankers, but they're all around a table having a meeting admitting that a crash is coming. They're saying this. And they're also saying publicly in this meeting, and they all kind of laugh about it, that they don't have any faith in the banks. They also admit on camera that they don't want you to know this because only people who need to know that it's coming should be notified, i.e. the wealthy. They don't want you to know about this. And they say it in this meeting. You common people shouldn't be told because You would take your money out of the banks, and then they wouldn't be able to use your money for bail-in purposes to save the banks. We'll let the rich people know about this, just like in March 2020. They made moves because we alerted them. They sold their stocks. They were in the know. They were fine. And you got screwed. And they're saying this in this meeting. This is the FDIC meeting. I'm going to show you a couple of different sound bites here. This is amazing. Watch.
Should be accessible when people need to know, but I don't think you have much hope of reaching a public that doesn't have a professional need to know.
I completely agree with that. I almost think you'd scare the public if you put this out. Like, why are they telling me this? Should I be concerned about my bank? Like, my insurance company doesn't tell me what they're doing with my assets. They just assume they're going to pay my claim. Right? I think you've got to think of the unintended consequences of taking a public that has more full faith and confidence in the banking system than maybe people in this room do.
You hearing them laughing?
They're laughing. That's really stinking condescending. What I hear from that is like, run along, little girl.
Yeah.
You don't need to know. And also, ever heard of FTX? Because, yeah, we don't like that. When we realize that people are doing stuff with our money this untowards. Turns out not a great idea.
So we don't have faith in the banking system in here, and they all laugh. They're like, yeah, none of us do. We're the FDIC.
We can't tell the little people what's really going on here. It'll just scare them, and their little brains can't handle it.
Because if they do, oh my God, they might panic, and they might actually want their own money that they worked 40 years of their lives for.
We want them to have full faith and confidence in the banking system. They know the FDIC insurance is there. They know it works. They put their money in. They're going to get their money out. So there's a select crowd of people that are in the institutional side. And if they want to understand this, they're going to find a way to understand this. There's a bunch of law firms represented in this room. There's a bunch of people that charge them by the hour a lot of money to explain this all to them. And it's fine. I don't have a problem with that. And they all have huge staffs. But I would be careful about the unintended consequences of starting to blast too much of this out in the general public.
I wondered whether there are some market tests of whether you're being heard.
So
there's no adult in that room. Like, yeah, that's fine.
I think about
anybody there who's like, maybe that's a little unethical. Should we have lunch on that? Should we think about that for a minute?
No, because they keep going. And that's just the first little chunk of this. So you're too stupid. We don't want you to know, the average person to know about this. If you're wealthy and you're plugged in, you've got a large legal team and you can pay people by the hour to figure all this stuff out. Yeah, you can figure it out.
I mean,
the average
he kind of has a
no.
point.
Well, he does have a point. The system is rigged.
Because like when they announced there was a pandemic, a viral infection, toilet paper was like impossible to get. There was a run on toilet paper. So I get that the fact that there would be a run on the banks. And it could devastate the banks, It will. Because people, yeah, totally.
Because of the way that they're structured.
Exactly.
It's a scam. It's a scam. And the great house of cards is going to come down. When the collapse comes, the FDIC admits that they will send out an announcement. So get ready for this.
Listen to this. This is the information, out of their own mouths, how it's going to play out.
They admit they will send out an announcement and they will tell us not to use money. This is how that's going to go down. They tell us that they plan on telling us on a Friday night. See if you can guess why they would tell us on a Friday night that the banking system has collapsed. Don't worry, don't use any money. We'll figure this out and we'll take care of you or not. We'll tell you on a Friday night. Listen to her explain when this will happen. Watch.
How would we use targeted guarantees to allay concerns about excess cash use? There's a lot of questions here. And so, there are a lot of things we've been thinking about. And what we want to hear from you today is what you think the priorities would be in order to go about setting expectations appropriately in public about how we would execute Title II. So that if and when we do have to have that announcement on Friday night, ideally Friday night, that people are in a position to receive it, understand it, and say, yeah, that works. And we can see how this will happen. Of course, there will be doubters, but there's a lot of things going on.
Okay, thanks for that.
So Friday night, of course, in the banking system is closed. So people all weekend can just be at home freaking out because, oh, wait a minute, I just lost, what's going to happen with my money?
Yeah.
My bank's gone. Like we're in this economic what the hell are you going to do about my money? It's gone. They're admitting.
So you see, that's the whole deal. If you hear that banking failed Friday evening after they're closed, it's going to be like it's going again disappeared. So if you hear about this, that about Friday, you'll know that you might have 10 to 30 days of trying to survive. And this is what I wanted you to hear, because it's so important to understand that they've got a plan and they don't want to tell you. They're going to tell you when it's already too late. Because Friday night, when everything was closed already, it's done. You won't be able to do anything. Even though that their FDIC, that they know they don't have enough money to cover something that they're supposed to insure. Listen, it was a long video, but this is what I want you to take from this video. If you understand the context of the end times and context of the revelation and basically the end story, the eschatology, you understand that the Lucifer wants to steal, kill, and destroy. And if he cannot kill, he'll basically enslave you and make you impoverish you and put you in a position that you will not be able to do it by yourself, survive by yourself. So you will be basically on the mercy of the government. So then you'll be able to take the mark of the beast without complaining, because you'll be afraid of your life, or afraid for your life. The 2023 looks like it might be the year of the economic destruction. And it would be good to prepare yourself for 10 to 30 days of food war and cash. And preferably, if you're inclined to, or if you have capacity to invest something in gold and silver and some cryptocurrencies. If you know what you're doing, it would be good to have something on stack, including cash. Look out for the Friday. If you hear that there's a Friday, you know that this is the beginning. Understand that it's everything about enslaving and making us dependent on state that will lead to the beast system. So you won't comply. So we will comply, and there will be no resistance from your part. What I want you to take from this is that your father is telling you about it, as he always said that he will say he's not going to do anything if he's not going to tell it to his servant prophets. And I'm calling myself a prophet, but I might take my part in telling you about this stuff, so you'll be able to prepare yourself before it's going to happen. I want you to pray. This is one of the things I want you to push, and I'm going to say it on the end of every video. Go on your knees, talk to your father, start praying, make it like a crucial part of your day. So you would pray every day and spend time and learn how to listen, learn how to talk to your father. Fast. Learn how to fast. And ask and pray for your calling in your church, what you're supposed to do, where you're supposed to be, how you're supposed to protect your family, how you protect the ones that you serve to, or maybe you employ some people, how to help them, and obviously how to help others. Because you've got to understand, we are here and we've got some role to play. This is like, if you look at this from the position that you know what will kind of happen and why, you've got to understand that we are here for a reason, and the whole idea is not to miss why we're here. Again, I'm going back to the calling. So that's why I understand that everything that happens is just to bring the darkness, and we're supposed to be a light for the rest of the world. So think about it and do something about it, because you might be the salvation, if you know what I mean, for many of those who are not going to be able to make it by themselves. Get into your calling, save their lives. If you like this video, like, share, and comment. If you didn't, comment as well. Tell me what you think and what is your experience. And if there's anything you want me to talk about, just give me a shout. I'll be really glad to talk about it for you. And that being said, see you in the next video.